Ludwig van Beethoven was born in 1770, so 14 years after Mozart, in Bonn, Germany. His alcoholic father, who was also a musician, desperately wanted him to be a prodigy like Mozart so he could become wealthy. Although Beethoven did have some works published when he was only 12, he didn't become noticed until his late teens. On a brief trip to Vienna in 1787, when he was 16 and Mozart was 30, he played for Mozart, who prophesied a great future for him. When he was nearly 21 and Haydn was 59, Beethoven played for Haydn, who found him impetuous, calling him a great mogul. This makes complete sense. Listen to the difference between the elegant and refined Haydn and the passionate and unbridled Beethoven. The sonata that we'll hear now, called the Pathétique, is pure Beethoven. You are about to hear the first movement of this work, so it will be in sonata allegro form. You also have this in your ebook, follow along with it later in your listening guide in the section on Beethoven. Beethoven was loved by the Viennese and was welcomed into the parlors of the social and intellectual elite, where he demanded to be treated as an equal, if not a superior. This was very unusual. Somebody who insisted on being treated as an equal or as superior to the aristocrats completely on the basis of his talent. He once commented, "It is well to mingle with aristocrats, but one must know how to impress them." Fiercely independent, he never wrote music at anyone's demand. Once, though, he was tempted to leave Austria, and 3 noblemen promised him an annual income if he just agreed to stay in Vienna. He drove hard bargains with his publishers and sometimes even sold the same music twice, which you don't do with publishers. In contrast to Haydn, who wrote more than 100 symphonies, Beethoven wrote only 9. He slaved over each one for years, leaving discarded sketches of alternate ideas for each phrase in his works, and they found him scattered all over his house, and generally wrote more than one symphony at the same time as ideas came to him. With the rise of public concerts, enterprising composers could bring in an excellent income in concert halls. Beethoven made part of his income from these performances. Remember how flimsy the original pianos were, basically using guitar strings that were hit by bare hammers? It was Beethoven who worked with the builders of the new pianoforte, as it was called, because it could play piano, which means soft, and forte, which means loud, to develop the strings and the pads of the hammers to make it function at concert level for this purpose. Remember that the piano had the ability to be touch sensitive, so again, controlling the pressure on the key made that piano louder or softer, and also enabled the composers to create crescendos, which meant to get gradually louder, and diminuendos to get gradually softer. This direct control of dynamics added a significant dimension to classical music. When he was only 29 years old, he started going deaf. This is an absolute tragedy for someone whose life and purpose was creating music, and it spelled an end to his career as a performer. Doctors were unable to treat the problem. We visited his home in Bonn, Germany, and saw, those horns that are shaped like this that people used to put in their ears. Well, we found those in several sizes displayed in rooms that visitors would use to talk to him. He wrote a letter to his brothers describing his torment dealing with this affliction. He said, "I must live like an exile. If I approach near to people, a hot terror seizes upon me, a fear that I may be subjected to the danger of letting my condition be observed. Thus it has been during the past year which I spent in the country, commanded by my intelligent physician to spare my hearing as much as possible. What a humiliation when one stood beside me and heard a flute in the distance and I heard nothing, or someone heard the shepherd singing and again I heard nothing. Such incidents brought me to the verge of despair, but little more I would have put an end to my life. Only art it was that withheld me. It seemed impossible to leave the world until I had produced all that I felt called upon me to produce, and so I endured this wretched existence. When Beethoven died, a young composer, Ferdinand Hiller, snipped off a lock of his hair. It was a common custom at the time. In 1994, that lock of hair was purchased by a doctor who ran extensive tests on it to determine how Beethoven lost his hearing. They concluded that he had chronic levels of lead poisoning, possibly from the goblets that were in use at that time, or it could have been from the wine at that time that used lead for sweetening. In spite of that handicap, which would have seemed to end his life as a composer, Beethoven wrote some of his finest and most innovative works when he was completely deaf. He had developed his mental hearing to such a level that he could actually create new harmonies just hearing them in his mind. You can trace his emotional journey in his passionate and powerful Fifth Symphony, which starts off in minor mode and resolves into major. Listen to that full first movement. Well, you have this in your ebook. You can watch it later along with your listening guide, but I want you to see this now with an orchestra performing it. You also have the second, third, and fourth movements in your ebooks with listening guides, showing how he tied that ba-ba-ba-ba, that four-note motive into each of the movements. Beethoven took years to write each symphony, as opposed to Haydn, who needed to pump them out quickly. As I said, he only wrote 9 of them. He wrote his 5th and 6th symphony at the same time, depending on his feelings in any given day, and they are profoundly different. While his 5th is very passionate, the 6th, the pastoral, is serene. Beethoven found deep solace in nature, and that comfort is felt in this beautiful work. His most powerful statement was his 9th symphony, when, discarding all precedent, he added a choir to the finale to sing Schiller's Ode to Joy. He was determined to conduct the premiere of this tremendous triumph, even though he couldn't hear it. When it concluded, the applause was thunderous, but he had no idea anyone was clapping until the concertmaster got up and turned him around so he could see his audience. Toward the end of his life, Beethoven was bursting the bonds of classical forms. He was composing sonatas that would have anywhere between 2 and 7 movements. He was using different textures from the rest of the classical era, including 2 double fugues at the end of the 9th symphony. And he experimented with clashes of sound. He literally burst out of the classical era. Some historians teeter on placing him in the Romantic era. Some just give up and give him his own chapter because he doesn't seem to fit in either place. Our final selection from Beethoven is an example of a rondo. It is the Beethoven String Quartet in C minor. Remember that a composition called a string quartet is actually a sonata form that is written for a performing group that is called a string quartet, which consists of 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. And in the classical sonata form, a rondo would be found in the 4th movement. And so, bingo, here we are with the 4th movement of this string quartet. A reminder that the rondo introduces a main theme and plays different material, then plays the main theme again, and then plays different material, and then returns to the main theme. You also have this composition in your ebook, and here you have it as a visual of a string quartet. String quartets are still very popular these days for weddings or elegant occasions.